She sold her hand to save her dreams, but the billionaire wanted her heart. Billionaire Bride. Chapter 1, Non-Disclosure, Non-Negotiable. Rhonda Vale signed her name the way you press a hand against a wound, firm, steady, pretending it doesn't hurt. The NDA paper stack smelled like toner and triumph. Across the obsidian conference table, Katrina Sloane watched her with the stillness of a raptor who'd learned patience pays higher dividends than speed. Last page, the attorney murmured, sliding a gold pen toward Rhonda. Initials here confirm your understanding that any discussion of the arrangement remains confidential. Arrangement. As if you could fold a life into a word and staple it shut. Rhonda's palm was still faintly stained ultramarine from a morning class, 8-year-olds painting oceans too wide for their paper. After school she'd graded, begged the landlord for one more week, then taken the elevator to Sloan Tower, 53 floors of glass, light and other people's certainty. Her art program's building had a red sticker on it now, condemned, pending repairs nobody would fund. Katrina's proposal had arrived an hour later like fate wearing an expensive coat. Rhonda initialed. The pen was heavy enough to make promises. Katrina tipped her head, a fraction. In person, the headlines lied about her. Ruthless looked different up close, less shark, more glacier. Sharp navy suit, slate eyes that didn't blink unless there was profit in it, a mouth with a flaw of softness at one corner like compassion that refused to fully dissolve. Thank you, Katrina said, voice low, almost musical. As of now, you're under my protection. Protection, Rhonda echoed. Is that what we're calling marriage? Katrina's mouth did the almost smile. A contract, she corrected. Marriage is a term of art. I prefer art terms that involve color. You'll find the palette broadens at this altitude. The attorney cleared his throat. Miss Sloane, the marriage license courier is waiting downstairs. If we file before 4, the ceremony can be scheduled Friday. 3 days. Rhonda's heartbeat threw a punch against her ribs. She looked down at her shoes, scuffed black flats with a smudge of cerulean at the toe. She'd chosen them on purpose, a reminder of whoever she'd been before stepping into this building that reflected sky like it owned it. Why me? She asked, finally. You could point at a room and say, you, and someone would say yes for the press release alone. Katrina regarded her, measuring. I don't need an ornament. I need discretion. Stability. And someone whose face doesn't flicker when I say the word control. Rhonda huffed. Control is how third graders stop eating glue. For a heartbeat the glacier cracked, a laugh escaped. Small, startled, beautiful. Then the surface froze again. Your school will receive the full endowment on signing, Katrina said, sliding a folder across the table. Blueprints. New mural space. A kiln. Rhonda's throat closed. Your program won't shutter. Rhonda stared at the numbers, trying not to cry in a room with cameras that weren't cameras. And me? Katrina's gaze didn't move. You'll live at Sloan House. 6 months, renewable. Public appearances as required, private life as negotiated. A pause. Softer, you won't be lonely. Unless you prefer it. Rhonda closed the folder. Is there a clause about telling the truth? Only if you insist. Katrina stood. Even her standing was quiet power. Come. See the view before you decide what it costs. They stepped onto a balcony that made the city look like a model, rivers of headlights, buildings stacked like ambitions. Wind lifted Rhonda's hair, Katrina's hand hovered as if to steady it, stopped, retreated. A detail. A restraint. Rhonda said, all right. All right, as in. As in, I'll marry you, Miss Sloane. She met Katrina's eyes and smiled with more teeth than sense. On one condition. Katrina's brow arched. Name it. You call me Rhonda. And every time you say, control, you have to tell me what you're afraid of losing. For the first time all afternoon, Katrina looked off balance. Not publicly, never publicly. Just a flicker, like light slipping. Then she nodded. Deal. Wind pressed cold against their cheeks. Somewhere below, sirens braided into evening. Rhonda extended her hand. Katrina took it. Warm. Steady. Human, disastrously so. Welcome to Sloan, Katrina said. Welcome to art, Rhonda returned, and tried not to think about all the colors fear could be. Chapter 2, The Sloan House Orientation. The car that came for Rhonda was silent enough to make her heartbeat sound like betrayal. Katrina's assistant, a polished woman named Margot, greeted her with a nod that could have passed for warmth if you squinted. Welcome to Sloan House, she said, ushering Rhonda into a mansion that looked less like a home and more like an architectural dare. Every surface gleamed, black marble, white stone, steel that reflected back a stranger's face. Your quarters are upstairs, Margot continued, her tone brisk. Ms. Sloane's room is across the hall. She requested you not share space until after the ceremony. Good, Rhonda said, forcing a smile. Wouldn't want to trip over all this romance. Margot blinked, uncertain if sarcasm required a response. Dinner at 8. Dress accordingly. When the door closed behind her, Rhonda sank onto the edge of the bed. The sheets were silk, the view was priceless, and she'd never felt cheaper. She ran her hands over the duvet, wondering if it would stain with paint. At 8 sharp, she descended into a dining room bigger than her entire apartment. Katrina sat at the head of the table, framed by a chandelier that looked like constellations carved from crystal. You're punctual, Katrina said, rising as Rhonda entered. I appreciate that. You said 8, Rhonda replied. I can follow orders. Katrina studied her, the corners of her mouth softening. I'm not looking for obedience, Rhonda. Just, partnership. Partnership? Rhonda tilted her head. You bought me like an IPO. Something flickered in Katrina's eyes, regret, maybe. You said yes. Because you made it sound like saving lives. And you knew I couldn't say no. Katrina's knife paused over her plate. You're angry. Rhonda lifted her wine glass, swirling the dark red liquid. No. Just aware. Katrina smiled faintly, a careful concession. Good. Awareness is useful. I like women who see the whole board. Rhonda met her gaze. I like women who play fair. For the first time that evening, Katrina's composure cracked just slightly, like a hairline fracture no one else would notice. Eat, she said quietly. You'll need your strength for the week ahead. Rhonda leaned back in her chair. What's happening this week? Katrina's smile returned, polished, unhelpful. Everything. Chapter 3, The Contract and the Kiss Clause. The ceremony was civil, efficient, and broadcast only to the legal department. Katrina wore black, of course she did, and Rhonda wore borrowed ivory silk that fit like a compromise. The justice of the peace didn't linger over the vows, he'd seen stranger things in Vegas. But when he said, "You may kiss the bride," the air shifted. Katrina's hand hovered near Rhonda's waist, uncertain. Her control cracked for a heartbeat, hesitation, softness, a question without words. Rhonda, God help her, answered it. She leaned forward first. The kiss was supposed to be for optics. It wasn't. It started as formality, a collision of professionalism and choreography, but it deepened into something that burned slow and strange. Rhonda could taste surprise on Katrina's lips, could feel her pulse leap in a neck that had only ever known poise. It lasted a second too long, then another. When they finally broke apart, the attorney coughed and mumbled, "Filed." Katrina looked away, cheeks touched by the faintest color, proof the billionaire bled like anyone else. That night, Rhonda explored her new cage. Sloan House was all glass walls and minimalism, beautiful, cold, and perfectly arranged to make you feel replaceable. Yet on the third floor, hidden behind an unmarked door, she found a studio. Paint-stained floor. Canvases stacked against the wall. A half-finished portrait of a woman whose eyes mirrored Katrina's. "Don't touch that." Katrina's voice, low and unguarded, came from the doorway. She stood barefoot, wine in hand, hair undone for once. "I didn't know you painted," Rhonda said. "I don't," Katrina replied too quickly. "Not anymore." Rhonda turned, leaning against the easel. "She looks like someone you miss." Katrina's throat worked once before she looked away. "She was someone I couldn't save." Rhonda studied her. "Maybe that's why you bought me. To rewrite the ending." Katrina's gaze snapped back to hers, sharp, wounded, alive. "You think I don't know a transaction from a tragedy?" "I think," Rhonda said softly, "you're starting to forget the difference." And for once, Katrina didn't deny it. Chapter 4, The Public Wife, The Private Stranger. By week 2, the tabloids had discovered them. Headlines called Rhonda the art teacher who captured a titan and Sloane's secret bride. Reporters staked out cafes and crosswalks, desperate for a shot of the billionaire and her pretty, bewildered wife. Katrina responded by tightening security and scheduling photo ops, controlled narratives, she called them. At the charity gala, Rhonda stood beside her under chandeliers like frozen fireworks. Cameras flashed, and Katrina's hand rested briefly on her lower back. "Smile," she murmured, "like I'm the best thing that's ever happened to you." Rhonda did. The press didn't notice that Katrina's fingers trembled slightly against her dress. Later, in the car, Katrina exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for hours. "You handled that well." "I'm used to performing," Rhonda said. "Mine just comes with glitter glue instead of publicists." A small, startled laugh escaped Katrina. "God, you're impossible." "And yet," Rhonda said, "you married me." The silence that followed was thick but not hostile, more like curiosity testing the edges of restraint. At home, Rhonda poured herself wine and wandered into the studio again. She found a new canvas waiting, a gift, apparently. Expensive oils. Fine brushes. A note in clean handwriting, "For the moments you still belong to yourself." She didn't hear Katrina enter until her reflection joined hers in the window glass. "You should paint," Katrina said quietly. "You look like you're breathing when you do." Rhonda turned. "And what do you look like when you breathe?" Katrina hesitated, then stepped closer. The city glittered behind them, distant, unreal. "Like this," she said, and kissed her again. This one wasn't for optics. It was unguarded and wrong in all the right ways, the kind of kiss that promised consequences. When it ended, Katrina whispered, "We have rules." Rhonda's pulse raced. "You're the one who wrote them." Katrina smiled faintly. "And you're the one breaking them." Rhonda brushed her fingers along Katrina's jaw. Maybe they needed breaking. And for the first time, Katrina didn't argue. Chapter 5, The Fault Lines. The morning after, the house felt different, like the air itself had a memory. Katrina was already in her glass-walled office, sleeves rolled up, hair pinned with ruthless precision. Rhonda lingered in the doorway, barefoot, pretending she wasn't watching her wife work. "Coffee?" Rhonda asked. Katrina didn't look up from her laptop. "Already had 2. "Of course you did." A pause, then, "You paint when you're restless," Katrina said, fingers still moving across the keyboard. "What do you do when you're scared?" "Marry billionaires," Rhonda said lightly, but the joke fell flat. Katrina finally looked up. "You think this is funny?" "No," Rhonda crossed her arms. "I think it's dangerous. For both of us." Katrina's gaze sharpened. "Then you're free to leave whenever you want." "Am I?" Rhonda stepped closer. "You tied my art school to this. You made me part of your empire." Katrina's voice softened in that deadly way only powerful people manage. "I gave you a platform. You gave me stability. We both got what we wanted." Rhonda's laugh cracked. That's the problem. I didn't know what I wanted until you. Katrina froze, expression unreadable. Don't romanticize it, Rhonda. You think this is love? This is an equation. Then why did you kiss me? Silence stretched, taut as glass about to shatter. Finally, Katrina said, because you stopped treating me like a calculation. She stood, moving around the desk. Up close, she smelled like cedar and stormlight. You should know better than to fall for someone who buys control for a living. Rhonda held her gaze. Maybe I'm the one thing you can't buy. Katrina's lips curved, small and sad. Don't test that theory. I've lost too much already. But Rhonda didn't back away. Then maybe it's time you lose to someone who actually cares. Katrina blinked, a slow exhale leaving her shoulders. Then she whispered, care is expensive, Rhonda. Rhonda smiled. Lucky for you, I'm a terrible negotiator. Chapter 6, The Storm Clause. By the third month, the contract had become a ghost haunting their daily routine, never seen, always felt. They moved like two planets caught in each other's gravity, separate, constant, doomed to collide. Every morning, Katrina left before dawn for meetings, headlines, empires. Every night, Rhonda stayed awake painting, colors bleeding into shapes she didn't recognize until the sun hit them. Sometimes Katrina came home late enough to watch her work, standing in the doorway like she was looking at a mirror she couldn't bear to touch. You paint emotions you don't name, Katrina said once. Is that deliberate? Rhonda didn't look up from the canvas. You build empires you don't live in. Is that? Katrina said nothing. But later, when Rhonda woke from a nap in the studio, she found a blanket draped over her shoulders and a coffee mug still warm beside her. The next day, a storm hit the coast, one of those dramatic, cinematic things that made city lights blur like watercolor. Power flickered. The house, usually invincible, trembled a little. Rhonda found Katrina on the balcony, rain misting her hair, phone in hand, voice clipped. No, push the launch to Monday. I don't care about optics, I care about uptime. She hung up and turned, noticing Rhonda. You shouldn't be out here. Neither should you, Rhonda said, stepping closer. You're going to catch pneumonia. Pneumonia's a myth perpetuated by weak immune systems. Rhonda laughed. And you wonder why no one argues with you. Katrina's jaw tightened, but her voice cracked just slightly when she said, people don't argue with me because they want something. What do I want, then? Rhonda asked. You want to fix me. No, Rhonda said softly. I want you to admit you're not broken. For a long time, Katrina didn't speak. Then, so quietly it was nearly lost to the rain, she said, you have no idea how much I wish that were true. She turned away, rain tracing her cheekbones like tears she'd never give herself permission to shed. Rhonda wanted to touch her, to say something that didn't sound like rescue. But the thunder answered first. And in that sound, she heard the truth. Control couldn't keep the storm out forever. Chapter 7, Glass Houses. The storm cut the power at midnight. For once, Sloan House went dark. Without the constant hum of electricity, it felt human, breathing, creaking, alive in ways its owner never allowed herself to be. Rhonda padded barefoot through the dark, guided by candlelight and instinct. She found Katrina in the library, surrounded by flickering flames and silence so thick it felt sacred. Katrina looked up from a decanter of scotch, her usual armor of poise traded for a loose white shirt and bare feet. I didn't realize you were awake. I don't sleep much in glass houses, Rhonda said, settling across from her. Afraid of breaking something? Afraid of what I'll see in the reflections. Katrina studied her for a long moment before pouring a second glass. You shouldn't try to understand me. I've made peace with being unknowable. That's not peace, Rhonda said. That's surrender. The candlelight painted shadows across Katrina's face, sharpening her edges, softening her eyes. You think I'm afraid of love, she said, almost to herself. I think you're afraid of needing it, Rhonda replied. Because needing means losing control. Katrina took a slow sip, gaze never leaving hers. You talk like love's a solution. No, Rhonda said. But it's not supposed to be a contract either. Katrina smiled faintly. You're infuriating. So I've heard. The thunder cracked again, shaking the windows. Without thinking, Katrina reached for her hand, reflex, not romance, but the touch lingered. You think I don't feel it too, she whispered. Every time you walk into a room, it gets harder to pretend this is business. Rhonda's voice was barely a breath. Then stop pretending. For a moment, the air between them went still, charged, dangerous. Katrina's jaw tightened, habit, fear, pride. But then something broke. She leaned in. The kiss was slower this time, deeper, a surrender rather than a dare. When it ended, she rested her forehead against Rhonda's and murmured, You should know, I don't do halfway. Rhonda smiled. Good. Neither do I. Chapter 8, The Merger. After that night, nothing returned to neutral. They still attended meetings, still signed contracts, still maintained the choreography of the arrangement, but between boardrooms and charity galas, Katrina's fingertips would graze the inside of Rhonda's wrist like punctuation. Small touches, private syntax. The press began whispering real affection, unlikely pair, modern fairy tale. Katrina ignored it. Rhonda didn't. She'd spent her life teaching people to look closer, and now the world was doing exactly that. In the studio, she painted the storm from memory, Katrina's silhouette lit by lightning, her face half in shadow, half in light. She didn't realize she was crying until the tears smeared the wet paint. Katrina found her hours later, sitting cross-legged on the floor. You shouldn't ruin it, she said softly. It's not ruined, Rhonda answered. It's real. Katrina knelt beside her, brushing her thumb along Rhonda's cheekbone. You make everything sound poetic. Even falling apart. Maybe that's what you needed me for, Rhonda said. Someone to remind you you're human. Katrina looked down at the canvas, the storm, the lightning, the woman who looked too much like her. And what do you need? Rhonda hesitated. Permission to stay. Something in Katrina's expression fractured, relief or fear, Rhonda couldn't tell. Then stay, she whispered. Stay, and stop calling this a contract. But the world didn't stop watching. 1 week later, during a press conference, a reporter asked the question they'd both dreaded, Miss Sloane, how does it feel to have bought love? The room fell silent. Cameras flashed like gunfire. Katrina's expression didn't change, but her knuckles went white on the podium. I didn't buy love, she said, voice steady. I stumbled into it. And for once, I didn't fire the person who made me feel it. Rhonda's breath caught. The confession was dangerous. Human. When the crowd erupted, she reached for Katrina's hand under the table. For the first time, Katrina didn't pull away. Chapter 9, The Fallout. The confession hit the wires before they made it home. By evening, every business feed and gossip site screamed the same headline, Sloane admits to love. Stock analysts called it reckless. PR teams called it catastrophic. Katrina called it inevitable. She stood in front of the fireplace, jacket discarded, glass of scotch untouched. They'll circle for blood, she said quietly. The board thinks affection is a liability. And you? Rhonda asked. Katrina turned, eyes burning with something raw. I think affection's the only thing I've done that wasn't calculated. Rhonda crossed the room, barefoot, heart thrumming. Then don't let them turn it into weakness. Katrina exhaled through her nose. You don't understand. In my world, every vulnerability has a price. Then let it cost you, Rhonda said. Let it make you human. Katrina's laugh cracked, low, helpless. You think that's bravery? It's suicide. No, Rhonda said softly. It's art. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Katrina whispered, they'll try to ruin me. Rhonda shook her head. No. They'll try to remind you you're alone. You just have to prove you're not. Katrina stepped closer, close enough that Rhonda could see the tiny tremor in her hand, the first visible sign that the fortress was shaking. If I lose everything, she said, the board, the company. Then you'll still have something that's yours, Rhonda interrupted. Not Sloan. Not headlines. You. Katrina stared at her like no one had ever said that before. And when she kissed her this time, it wasn't a surrender or a dare, it was defiance. Outside, reporters swarmed the gates. Inside, the Empire's queen burned the rulebook one page at a time, with the only woman she'd ever let close enough to see her bleed. Chapter 10, The Buyout of the Heart. By morning, Katrina's empire trembled but didn't fall. Shares dipped, then surged again. The market loved drama more than it loved balance sheets. Yet the damage was personal, not financial. Her board demanded a meeting. The PR chief wanted a retraction. Katrina told them all to go to hell, which, for her, sounded almost gentle. Rhonda watched her from the edge of the conference room as she spoke to 12 men who suddenly looked very small. I'm not issuing a statement, Katrina said coolly. If honesty offends the shareholders, they can sell. I'll buy them out myself. The chairman sputtered. You can't buy your way out of this. Katrina's eyes narrowed. Watch me. Afterward, the silence in the hallway was electric. Rhonda reached out, brushing her fingers over Katrina's sleeve. You didn't have to do that. Yes, Katrina said simply, I did. She looked exhausted, no makeup, no armor, her pulse visible at the base of her throat. They only respect me when I'm untouchable. But I'm tired of being myth. Rhonda's voice softened. Then stop being one. Katrina turned toward her, eyes fierce and frightened all at once. You think I can just unlearn survival? Rhonda stepped closer. Not unlearn. Redefine. Katrina's laugh was shaky. You talk like change is art. It's not that easy. It's not supposed to be, Rhonda said. But you taught me something too, you don't build anything worth keeping without risk. Something broke then, beautifully and completely. Katrina pulled her in, the kiss desperate, grateful, real. When they finally separated, Katrina whispered against her lips, You've ruined my reputation. Rhonda smiled, voice trembling. And you've ruined my loneliness. Later that evening, they sat together on the balcony, watching the skyline flicker. The wind moved through Rhonda's hair, Katrina's hand rested on her knee, unthinking, unguarded. Do you regret it? Rhonda asked quietly. Katrina's eyes met hers. Every logical part of me says yes. And the rest? Katrina smiled, a small, honest curve of her mouth. The rest of me finally feels alive. Chapter 11, The Art of Surrender. The headlines eventually dulled, as all storms do. Scandal gave way to fascination, fascination to fatigue. Investors moved on to fresher gossip, markets recovered. But for Katrina, something had shifted that couldn't be traded back. She started coming home before midnight. Her assistant stopped hovering quite so close. Her voice in board meetings lost its serrated edge. Rhonda noticed it all in quiet increments. She'd find Katrina barefoot in the kitchen, sleeves rolled to her elbows, studying her own reflection in a dark window like she was still deciding who that woman was now. You don't have to keep proving you're human, Rhonda said one night. You already are. Katrina looked at her over the rim of a wineglass. You say that like it's a compliment. It is. Most of us spend our lives running from it. Katrina set the glass down, stepped closer. You think I'm changing because of you. I think, Rhonda said softly, you finally gave yourself permission to feel something. Katrina's hand brushed her cheek, thumb tracing a paint smear she hadn't realized was there. You're still messy, she murmured. And you're still impossible. Their laughter folded into a kiss, lazy and unhurried. No contracts. No rules. Just two women who had stopped pretending that control was safety. Later, when Rhonda returned to the studio, she found a new canvas propped against the wall. It wasn't hers. It was Katrina's, tentative brushstrokes forming an unfinished skyline in shades of blue and ash. At the bottom corner, a single line of handwriting. For the one who taught me color isn't chaos. Rhonda pressed her hand to the paint, smiling. You're learning, she whispered. Behind her, Katrina's voice was low and certain. No, she said, slipping her arms around Rhonda's waist. I'm finally living. Chapter 12, The Unwritten Clause. Spring arrived like a reprieve. The glass house that once echoed now sounded lived in. The hum of a coffee maker, the thud of Rhonda's music leaking from the studio, the quiet tap of Katrina's keyboard somewhere nearby. They didn't call it love, not aloud. It existed in the small exchanges, a shared towel after the shower fogged the mirror, the way Katrina started signing her emails K, instead of her full, weaponized name. One Saturday morning, Rhonda came downstairs to find Katrina in the courtyard barefoot, surrounded by clay pots. Soil streaked her wrist. A disaster in progress. What are you doing? Rhonda asked, trying not to laugh. Attempting domesticity, Katrina said, scowling at a wilted fern. Apparently plants require water. A design flaw. Rhonda knelt beside her, guiding her hands. Gentle, she said. You're not negotiating a merger. Katrina's fingers stilled under hers. Feels like one. Because you can't control it? Because I might like it. Rhonda's heart twisted. That's the point. Katrina looked up, eyes softer than sunlight through glass. I don't know what to do with peace, she admitted. I've spent my life sprinting toward storms. Rhonda smiled faintly. Then maybe stop running. Let someone catch you. Someone like you? Someone exactly like me. Katrina reached out, wiping dirt on Rhonda's cheek just to make her laugh. You're infuriating. And you're impossible. Perfect, Katrina said. We'll build a life on contradictions. Rhonda stood, brushing off her jeans. Deal. When she looked back, Katrina was watching her with that same reverence she used to reserve for victory. Only this time, it wasn't about conquest. It was about being seen. Inside, the wind rustled through the open doors, carrying the scent of paint and rain. The empire still stood. So did they, not as contract or compromise, but as something frighteningly, beautifully alive. And for the first time, neither of them wanted control. Chapter 13, The Gallery of Us. By summer, Rhonda's art program had reopened in a new building, bright walls, real supplies, a mural space funded by Sloan Foundation grants. The irony wasn't lost on her. Every time she signed the payroll checks, her new signature, Rhonda Vale Sloane, made the kids giggle. Miss Rhonda, are you rich now? One of them asked. She laughed. No. I just married someone who makes spreadsheets for breakfast. That night, Katrina came to the opening of Rhonda's first public exhibit. She stood in front of a painting called The Contract, a sprawling piece of oil and light that showed two women, one made of glass, the other of color, reaching for each other across a crack that glowed gold instead of bleeding. Katrina lingered a long time, unreadable. You make me look fragile, she said quietly. You are, Rhonda said. That's why you shine. Katrina's throat worked, and for once she didn't deflect. The critics will call it sentimentality. Then they've never been in love. Later, when the gallery emptied, they walked hand in hand through the city. No cameras, no guards, just the hush of late streets and the sound of heels on pavement. I used to think freedom meant never needing anyone, Katrina said. And now? Katrina looked at her, eyes warm and unguarded. Now it means you. They stopped at a crosswalk. Neon signs flickered over their heads. Rhonda turned, brushing a strand of hair from Katrina's face. "We're a scandal, you know." Katrina smiled. "Then let's make it beautiful." Under the city's hum, they kissed again, not to prove a point, not for show, but simply because they could. Because somewhere between the contracts and the chaos, they had become something neither of them could define but both recognized. Love, rewritten in fine print and oil paint. And this time, there was no clause for escape. Chapter 14, Terms of Forever. Autumn slipped in quietly, carrying the kind of peace that used to terrify Katrina. The house no longer felt like a fortress, it breathed. The staff moved without whispers, laughter found corners where silence once reigned, and the scent of turpentine lingered in the hallways like incense. Rhonda sat on the floor of the studio one evening, a mess of brushes at her feet, her jeans ruined again. She was working on something small, intimate, a portrait she kept turning away when Katrina entered. "What are you hiding?" Katrina asked, leaning against the doorframe. Rhonda smiled without looking up. "Trade secret." Katrina crossed the room, her bare feet soundless on the wood. "You forget who owns the trade." "Not anymore," Rhonda murmured. "This one's mine." When she finally turned the canvas around, Katrina inhaled. It was her, Katrina, not as the world saw her, not as a CEO or a myth, but as a woman at peace, eyes half closed, a hint of a smile she never gave the cameras. Around her, the background was nothing but warmth, sunlight through gauze, the color of contentment. Katrina reached out, tracing her own painted face. "You made me soft." Rhonda tilted her head. "You are soft. You just forgot." For once, Katrina didn't argue. She sank to the floor beside her, shoulders brushing. "Marry me again," she said suddenly. Rhonda blinked. "We're already married." "Not for convenience," Katrina said. "For forever. No press, no signatures. Just you and me." Rhonda smiled, eyes glinting. "What's the clause?" "None," Katrina whispered. "This time, you write it." Rhonda leaned in, lips ghosting over hers. "Clause 1, she murmured. "No control." "Clause 2. Katrina breathed. "Love. Every messy, terrifying inch of it." Katrina kissed her then, deep and certain, the kind of kiss that didn't promise perfection, only permanence. And in that moment, surrounded by unfinished canvases and fading daylight, they finally signed the only contract that mattered, one written in touch, trust, and 1,000 colors that refused to fade. Chapter 15, The Quiet Fortune. Winter returned the way it always did, slowly, imperceptibly, until one morning the world outside Sloan House glittered like a promise. Rhonda woke first. She always did. She padded down the hall in one of Katrina's oversized shirts, the fabric brushing her knees, the air faintly scented with cedar and paint. She poured 2 mugs of coffee and carried them to the balcony where the city lay hushed beneath frost. Katrina joined her a few minutes later, hair tousled, eyes still heavy with sleep. For once she didn't reach for her phone. She reached for Rhonda's hand. "Do you realize," Katrina said quietly, "I used to think love was inefficiency?" Rhonda smiled into her coffee. "And now?" "Now I think it's profit I never accounted for." Rhonda laughed softly. "That's the most capitalist way anyone's ever said, 'I love you.'" Katrina turned to her, mock offense melting into something tender. "Fine," she said. "I love you, then." It wasn't grand. It wasn't a declaration shouted from rooftops. It was an ordinary sentence spoken in the cold, sincere and unguarded. That was what made it extraordinary. They stood there in silence, the city slowly waking around them. Somewhere below, a delivery truck backfired, a jogger's breath steamed in the air. Life, relentless and ordinary. Katrina brushed her thumb along Rhonda's knuckles. "Do you ever miss who you were before all this?" Rhonda considered. "Sometimes. But I think she'd like where I ended up. She would, Katrina said. She saved me. Rhonda leaned against her shoulder, warm against the chill. You saved yourself. I just painted the proof. Katrina pressed a kiss to her hair. Then keep painting. I want to see how our forever looks. Rhonda smiled. Messy. Good, Katrina whispered. Messy's human. The wind picked up, scattering snowflakes like confetti. Inside, the coffee steamed on the railing, forgotten. And there, above the city that had built and broken them both, two women stood together, no contracts, no control, just the quiet fortune of having chosen and kept choosing each other. Chapter 16, The Final Exhibit. A year later, the museum asked Rhonda to curate a solo exhibition. The title came easily, Billionaire Bride. Katrina had rolled her eyes when she first heard it, but she was the first to write the check that made it happen. On opening night, the galleries glowed with low amber light. Critics mingled with art students, champagne flutes clinked. Cameras flashed, but this time, neither of them flinched. The first room held the early pieces, fractured portraits, storm colors, control rendered in brushstrokes tight enough to choke. The next was lighter, full of movement and warmth. The final room stopped people in their tracks. In the center hung a single painting, two women dancing barefoot on a balcony, one in an oversized shirt, one in a silk slip, the city shimmering below them like stars caught in glass. No jewelry, no titles, no performance, just joy. Katrina stood in front of it for a long time, expression unreadable. Rhonda slipped beside her, sliding her hand into hers. Do you see what I see? She asked. Katrina nodded slowly. Freedom. It's us, Rhonda said. I know. Katrina's smile was small, a secret between them. You made us immortal. Only if the paint holds. It will, Katrina said. You use permanence better than anyone I've ever met. Later, when the lights dimmed and the crowd thinned, they stood alone in that final room. Katrina turned to her, eyes soft. You've given me more than I knew how to want. Rhonda laughed quietly. And you gave me the impossible. What's that? A happy ending. Outside, snow began to fall again, slow, soundless, infinite. Inside, surrounded by color and history, two women stood exactly where they were meant to be, no longer a bargain, no longer a facade, but a masterpiece signed in both their names. And for once, neither of them needed control, because love, wild, human, ungoverned, had already written the rest. Chapter 17, The Frame That Holds Us. The painting stayed in that museum for 6 months, then quietly returned home. Rhonda hung it in the entryway of Sloan House, a space that used to intimidate her but now felt like walking into the inside of a heartbeat. Katrina came in late one night, dusted with snow, shoulders sagging under the weight of another negotiation. She paused in front of the painting, staring at it the way she used to stare at spreadsheets, like she was searching for the numbers that made it make sense. You're home, Rhonda said from the stairs. I am, Katrina said, still looking at the painting. You made us look inevitable. You are, Rhonda said softly. You always were. You just needed to see it. Katrina turned, eyes tired but warm. When I met you, I thought love was something that happened to other people. Something optional. And now? Katrina crossed the room until they were face to face. Now I know it's the only thing that ever made me human. They stood like that for a long moment, two women who had learned the cost of power and the currency of tenderness. Rhonda brushed a strand of hair from her wife's face. You realize we're still a scandal, right? Katrina's lips curved. Then let them talk. Rhonda smiled. You used to control the narrative. I still do, Katrina murmured, drawing her close. It's just not for them anymore. They kissed beneath the painting, framed by light and memory. Outside, the city glowed like a heartbeat beneath snow. Inside, the air was warm with color and quiet certainty. Rhonda whispered against her lips, "What's next for us?" Katrina smiled, eyes closing. "Whatever we decide to create." And in the reflection of the glass, their faces side by side, the world still turning, they looked like the ending of every story that forgot to apologize for love. Chapter 18, After the Noise. The following year was quieter, which in their world felt revolutionary. No scandals, no press conferences, no contracts written in invisible ink. Just life, mundane, miraculous life. Katrina traded 12-hour boardroom marathons for 6-hour workdays, leaving her assistants bewildered and the markets unfazed. She started walking to work when the weather allowed, stopping at the same corner cafe Rhonda loved. The barista, a teenager with green hair, learned her order: black coffee, too hot to sip, always taken to go. Rhonda filled her days with paint and children in color, teaching at the new art center she'd helped rebuild. Sometimes she'd catch herself staring out the classroom window, thinking about how improbable her life had become, a broke teacher turned into a wife, a muse, a co-conspirator in a billionaire's redemption arc. At night, they met in the middle, Katrina shedding the world like a coat, Rhonda smelling faintly of turpentine and sunlight. They'd cook, badly, dance, worse, and fall asleep tangled on the couch like teenagers who'd forgotten adulthood had rules. One evening, while Rhonda was sketching, Katrina looked up from her laptop and said, "You know, we never had a honeymoon." Rhonda smiled without looking up. "We had a war, a scandal, and a museum retrospective." "You want more?" Katrina grinned. "I want less. Just you, no headlines, no staff, no schedules." "Where?" Rhonda asked. "Anywhere you can't get Wi-Fi," Katrina said. Rhonda set her pencil down, feigning shock. "The great Katrina Sloane without connectivity?" Katrina's voice dropped, teasing. "I'm connected to the only thing that matters." And as Rhonda leaned in to kiss her, she realized that was the quietest kind of wealth, the kind that didn't fluctuate, didn't need proving, and couldn't be sold. The empire hummed outside their window, but inside, they had already built something stronger: peace. Chapter 19, The Color That Stayed. They left for the mountains in late spring, just before the first heat wave. No press, no entourage, no schedule. A small cabin on the edge of nowhere, the kind of place where the internet forgot to exist and stars remembered how to burn. The first night was awkward. Katrina didn't know what to do without a boardroom, and Rhonda couldn't stop watching her rediscover silence. By the second night, the awkwardness had softened into laughter, by the third, into quiet touches that didn't need translating. Katrina chopped wood like she was taking revenge on capitalism. Rhonda painted the changing light on the lake, her hands always stained with some new color. They learned each other's rhythms, Katrina's stillness, Rhonda's mess, the way they fit like brushstroke and canvas. One morning, Katrina found Rhonda on the porch, sketchbook in her lap, eyes shining. "What are you working on?" "Our life," Rhonda said simply. Katrina sat beside her, watching the lines take shape, two figures side by side, no names, no money, no contracts. Just a home, and the horizon, and the suggestion of a hand reaching for another. When Rhonda closed the book, Katrina took her hand, thumb brushing the streak of blue on her knuckle. "You never paint endings," she said. "They don't exist," Rhonda replied. "Only moments that last." The breeze moved through the pines, cool and patient. Somewhere, far below, the world kept spinning its noise and headlines. But here, this porch, this touch, this breath, it all went still. Katrina leaned her head on Rhonda's shoulder. "Then let this one last," she whispered. And it did, long after the world forgot their scandal, long after empires and exhibitions and everything that didn't matter. Because some stories don't end. They just settle, like color that refuses to fade, like love that finally learns how to stay. Epilogue, the signature that stayed. Years later, Sloan House was quieter but never still. The boardroom had been turned into an open studio. The walls once lined with screens now held Rhonda's paintings, bursts of color that never stopped moving. The headlines were gone. The world had moved on to new obsessions. But among collectors, the legend endured, the Billionaire Bride series, 15 canvases chronicling a love story money couldn't quantify. On a bright morning, Katrina stood beside Rhonda in the same courtyard where she'd once tried to negotiate control out of chaos. Her hair had silver now, her voice carried a warmth that came from surviving herself. "You've stopped signing your paintings," she said. Rhonda smiled, eyes still fixed on the canvas she was finishing, an abstract sweep of gold and crimson. "I don't need to. They all know who it's about." Katrina stepped closer, touched her shoulder. "And who's that?" Rhonda turned, kissed her gently, paint dusting Katrina's cheek. "The woman who learned to live in color." Katrina's eyes softened. "You taught me that." "No," Rhonda said. "You let me." They stood there, sunlight spilling through the glass ceiling, hand in hand. In the reflection of the windows, two figures blurred together, color and glass, art and reason, permanence and change. For years, the world had called their story impossible. But standing there, surrounded by the living proof of it, they knew better. It hadn't been a fairy tale. It had been work. Forgiveness. Patience. 1,000 small choices that built something stronger than the empire Katrina once ruled. When the light finally shifted, Katrina whispered, "Still think love isn't profitable?" Rhonda grinned. "It's the only thing that's ever paid off." Outside, the city moved as always, loud, relentless, bright. Inside, in the house that once defined control, love hung on the walls like the most valuable thing they'd ever made together. And it was. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this sapphic love story. I hope you'll subscribe and stick around for more.